Everyone, thanks for joining. We'll go ahead and get started here. Today we're going to talk about a topic that I think a lot of organizations are grappling with right now, which is really how do we drive and derive value from our data. Um, Really today we're going to go through kind of a high-level overview of the data strategy framework that we utilize here at SVA. Really, the goal there is to give you guys kind of a starting point of how you can start to build a data strategy internally and actually drive your business forward with data-driven decision making. Quick introduction about myself. My name is Cooper Scott. I'm the Director of Analytics here at SVA Consulting. So yeah, let's jump into it. All right. So quickly give an overview of how we're going to run today. We'll move through a few areas. I'm going to give a quick overview about SVA and our history. We'll kind of do a quick deep dive of what a strategy is. Talk about why it matters. We'll get a little bit more real and talk about how we can actually get from a theoretical place to actual execution. We'll kind of wrap up with a few next steps and summarize and talk about how you can start implementing on your own. So a little bit about SVA Consulting. We've been in business for a little over 50 years, representing clients across most of the US. We have a business evolution practice that drives change within organizations, business applications where we help with digital transformation and ERP implementation. We have our analytics and visualization practice that is really who you're talking to today and helps determine how we empower and drive data-driven decisions in business. Our life sciences commercialization practice and our AI enablement practice, which really you'll see is really kind of the next step after you've put together a cohesive data strategy. A little bit about the data analytics and visualization practice. Like I said, our core goal here is to help you turn your data into actual knowledge and insights so that you can go from being kind of a gut decision to a data-driven decision-making business and really help drive your business forward. We're a dedicated partner who can handle the full life cycle from the initial data strategy all the way through to that AI enablement and activation. So really a great business partner there. How we get there, we've got a few different kind of core pillars of the analytics and AI piece. So we've got the data strategy, which is what we're talking about today, which is really where we plan out how we're going to get there. Architecture development, which is where we build and unify your data into kind of a centralized data platform. And then the visualization piece, which is really where we help eliminate that lack of insight and oversight into your data and what's happening in your business. And then the AI enablement piece, which is where we go kind of beyond that, prescriptive data piece where we're seeing what happened and we start using AI and other advanced analytics to figure things out faster and help make decisions quicker. This kind of just gives a quick overview of really what we do as kind of a core business model, right? We'll extract data across your various sources and systems, load and transform that into a centralized data platform that could be like a Snowflake, a Microsoft Fabric, a Databricks, or even just an on-prem data warehouse, and then build out reporting and visualizations on top of that. I think this visual does a nice job of kind of summarizing it. And really, this is when we talk today about data strategy, what you see here is kind of the next step after that. The data strategy is where we define exactly how we're going to do this so that instead of trying to build the car while we're driving, we know exactly what we're doing before we start. Okay, so talk a little about the anatomy of a strategy, right? Dissecting kind of what a data strategy is. So at its core, the data strategy, you could really think of it as a bridge. It's really the plan for how we get from we have data, we're aggregating data across all these different systems to deriving like true insights and value out of that data. It's really that vision for the organization that aligns your systems, people, everything about your business into this single kind of unified engine for success. If your systems aren't kind of tied to your business and your business goals, you don't really have a strategy, you're kind of just have data for the sake of having data, and really just have like a data storage problem. You're just growing a massive data store without really figuring out what the value is. Um, so that's kind of what a data strategy is at a high level. What it's not is like there's a few things that are part of it, but like I think a lot of times people kind of get hung up on like, oh, it's just figuring out what piece of tech I'm going to buy, or just putting together a roadmap for IT. But there's really a lot more that goes into it, especially around aligning everything back to the business, because at its core, everything needs to tie back to how do we drive the business forward? How do we create value? What I like to show here is like there's kind of four key dimensions around a data strategy, right? There's those business goals we talked about, where we really want to identify the specific outcomes the organization needs and wants to achieve in order to continue to grow and continue to be successful. There's the technology piece, which is identifying the systems and the architecture that are going to underlie your data build, and really understanding like what is going to grow with you. One of the biggest issues we see is if we don't think thoroughly and completely about what we're going to build, a lot of times companies will end up with kind of a tool that only grows to a certain point, but then when they have a new reporting need or a new system they want to bring in, they'll have trouble scaling, and then it makes it very hard. And then you kind of end up with this sort of Frankenstein architecture where you've got a tool bolted on top of another tool on top of a data warehouse. We've got the processes. So really just when we look at our people, the processes are what they're doing to drive the business forward. Um, it's core to keep these in mind through the data strategy, because this is where the data is being generated. And then also there's kind of this idea of like the offensive and defensive processes. You're going to have this kind of idea that you want to drive things forward as quickly as possible to kind of keep momentum. And then there's also these defensive processes, which is really like the gridlock mindset that you'll see in IT a lot, where it's like, oh, we need to be slow and methodical. So it's really finding a balance between those two in the processes area. And then in the people and culture area, that's really where we're making sure that we're focused on the people who are going to be part of this kind of data transformation and strategy for the organization. So it's really key that we drive data literacy and ensure that people are taking ownership for and feel accountable for the data across the organization. One of the biggest issues we see here is like if we're not keeping the teams who are going to be using the data and analytics and reporting in mind and kind of informed and involved throughout the process, you can kind of get into this point where you build all this stuff and then you end up with teams who don't actually really trust or believe in the data, and ultimately they're just going to revert back to what's comfortable, which might just be Excel spreadsheets or doing things on a piece of paper. So it's really key that you look at kind of the business as a whole, understand each of these dimensions as you're building out your data strategy, to ensure that everything is involved throughout the whole process. So I want to talk a little bit about why it matters, and kind of like what the risks are if we're not super specific and holistic in thinking around a data strategy. So I'm gonna speak in analogies here for a bit. So if we kind of think without a blueprint, or we build without a blueprint, I think I used the analogy before of driving a car while you're building it. You could ultimately kind of end up with this sort of Frankenstein monster, which is like a house built on top of a house, built on top of a house. I'll tie it back to systems here. It usually starts at the base, right, you launch your business. And ultimately, the only thing you really need a system for at the beginning is just to make sure you can put out your accounting statements. So you get your core, accounting ERP in place. It's clean, it's functional, it's simple, handles your basic reporting needs just fine. But you start to think, okay, well, I want to grow this business. I need more sales. I need more leads. I've got a sales team now, and I don't really know what they're doing. So maybe you go out and you buy a CRM. So now you've got customer data in one place and financial data in another. Um, and you really don't have them aligned yet. And you can almost kind of start to see how you're going to have problems here. Um, and then let's say now you're thinking, I need to grow my business even farther. I need to get different channels out there so I can keep bringing in new customers and getting my product in the hands of other people. So maybe you launch your e-commerce site. That's another addition. Now you've got customers in two different places. You're generating transactions in three different places. You're really starting to create these kind of silos with your data where you've got data sitting in a few different systems. Um, maybe you've got integrations, maybe you don't, but the holistic picture still might not be being painted where you can actually see anything across all of this. Um, let's say we've grown a little bit more here. We're starting to have like inventory shortages, things like that, and you think, okay, I need an inventory management system. Um, at this point, we're at the top of our house here. Things are probably starting to get a little shaky. You've got four different business systems, and none of them share like a common uh, source of data. You really got no way to tie your inventory management data back to your accounting system. Um, Getting answers out of your data is difficult at best and maybe impossible. And on top of that, you've probably got four different functions, and each one is slicing data from their system in a different way and getting to different answers. Um, so we see this a lot. And then we're here, and then the order comes in. It's from higher up from leadership. It's like, okay, we need to understand the full life cycle of our customer. So they make their first purchase on an e-commerce site maybe, and then maybe they start calling orders into our salespeople, and that's tracked in the CRM. Um, Maybe we have some marketing component on top too, so we want to understand like our cost to acquire. We want to look at their purchasing patterns so we can match that against our inventory management system to say, okay, this person's probably going to reorder at this time, so we need to make sure we have inventory in stock to support that. Um, really want to understand like that full customer lifecycle journey. So this is where maybe you'll engage some people from the organization to start building out some sort of analytics solution, which you kind of bolt on top, right? It's your first big initiative, or maybe it's a dashboard report, maybe it's some sort of advanced automation. Um, what we start to see is like this is a really precarious position. You'll have people spending most of the time rather than like building and analyzing based on the data, they're going to spend that time just trying to keep everything afloat because, again, you've got four different systems, five different systems talking to each other. As things change in those systems, like, it's just this precarious, very precarious position. And ultimately, what we see a lot is they'll be shaky and eventually fail. Um, so yeah, one to draw this picture. It's a little silly, but this house is really what you kind of want to avoid building with a data strategy. And really, if you stepped back, built the data strategy first, you probably would design the house very different than how we're looking at it here. So talked a little about there, but like what does a clear data strategy really bring? Well, maybe we start actually with what it brings, what you encounter when you don't have a clear data strategy, which is really what I like to call this chaos tax. You may also hear people refer to tech debt, very similar concept. Um, and it's almost like this invisible line on your P&L that you didn't sign up for and you really don't want. Um, but you've got, disorganized data sitting in silos. And so you're going to have your high paid managers who understand the data spending hours every week putting together some crazy spreadsheet in Excel just to verify that their profit number is right or something like that. Um, where we move towards is really this like unified data structure that's aligned to your business goals. So instead of people spending time putting together the data, they can spend time actioning the data and analyzing the data. Um, Another term that you'll hear thrown around is this idea of like shadow BI or shadow IT. This is really where you've got people across the organization kind of all building their own thing and not building from a consistent source of truth. So you might have people in finance and accounting, and then someone in sales, and they're all thinking that profit for a product is different because someone's pulling some line item out when they're calculating, and someone else is putting in some add back. So really, you get this metric misalignment. And then when you go to a board meeting, again, instead of spending time actually talking about what's going on, you're going to spend time arguing because someone says that you've got a 50% profit margin and someone says you have a 52% profit margin, and everyone's going to want to pick that number to death. Where we move towards is kind of this functional alignment across all of your KPIs and metrics to ensure that the organization is aligned on every single metric they want to measure. That way, when we say revenue, we mean revenue, and we know exactly what ties into that. Maybe the last big one here is those analytics initiatives and AI initiatives that a lot of people are looking to create these days. Really, success in those is driven by a strong foundation. And if you don't have the data unified in a way that works and was like purpose built for that, a lot of times you'll have stalled initiatives or initiatives that ultimately just fail, and time spent building that just for it to fail is lost time and ultimately lost money. So really, a lot of what we're trying to do here is avoid lost time, wasted time. A lot of what we're doing with the data strategy is figuring out how we go from like our data is a bunch of work for us to our data works for us, going from that like negative line item on a P&L to a positive line item, right? Where we're actually adding value back into the organization. So I said a lot about theoretical things there. What I kind of want to do now is sort of tie that back to the framework that we implement. We'll give a quick high-level overview of what that actually is, what we do, and hopefully this will give you guys a little bit of a head start on thinking about how you can start doing this in your organization if you're at a place where you are starting to think maybe this is something I need to do. So we break our framework into kind of three distinct phases. We start identifying the who, what, and why. We design the how and where, and then we plan the when. This is all really to ensure that everything we do in the future is all very carefully planned. So we'll break down each of these phases here. Okay, so phase one, the who, what, and why, right? First, we really want to start with a lot of discovery because that's one of the biggest advantages we've seen with like doing a real data strategy within an organization is actually taking the time to talk to your functional leads, people who are actually in the business and understand like what are they reporting on? What are they struggling to report on? What sort of gaps do they have? So they want to take a step back and analyze like the full landscape is really the big idea here. Typically how we'll do that is with functional interviews. So get a group of people or even maybe just like one or two functional leads from each function of the business and talk with them. This is where those are the who really when we're talking about the who, what, and why. We'll define, what is success to them for the organization, which is really the why. And then we start to identify again those pain points and reporting gaps, which are kind of the what and why are we building a data strategy. From there, we'll work to summarize those requirements and align them to aspirations and goals of the business. In general, these metrics and KPIs that we're defining should always tie back to the broader strategy of the organization, because otherwise, again, we're kind of just like building a dashboard to build a dashboard, whereas really we want to build a dashboard so that we can enable our business to make better decisions to be more successful. Really, the overall goal here is really just alignment because we want to make sure everyone agrees on what's important and what different metrics mean before anyone starts writing code or building dashboards, right? So phase two is where we kind of get to the how and where, right? It's that architecture, design, and system selection that's really going to be informed by phase one. Um, so we start here mapping out our source systems and data. That's where we're really going to work to understand what's coming from every system and how is it going to work together in reporting. Um, in a lot of ways, this is kind of where we design like what feels like the magic part of a data platform, which is where we say like, okay, we've got customer 1, 2, 3 in our CRM and customer 4, 5, 6 in our e-commerce site. This is where we build the logic, say, okay, in our reporting, we're just going to call them customer one, and we can bring the data from e-commerce and from our CRM together into one unified picture. It's also where, in general, we're going to decide what that underlying architecture looks like. So it's going to depend very heavily on the requirements of the project. And again, I think I mentioned earlier, but it's really important that we ensure when we are selecting a system for a data platform or a reporting tool to throw on top of that data platform, that we have the future in mind. We don't want to pick a tool that's ultimately going to be a limiter, because then we'll end up with some of that tech debt we mentioned earlier, where we're then going to have to transfer everything we've done to a different tool. Really want to build it once and build it right. And then finally, we're kind of going to take everything from that phase one requirements and KPIs kind of discussions and build out what we call a dimensional model. So really, these are the kind of the technical facts and dimensions that make up your business. You can think of this like what we want to report on it and how we want to report on it. An example might be, we want to be able to report on our customer lifetime value, and we need to be able to look at it by customer, by region, by customer type, or maybe we need to be able to slice our profit by salesperson. Again, this will inform exactly what we're going to pull from all these different source systems to ensure that we're able to report on everything we need to be able to report on. Again, we're kind of just ensuring that we understand reporting needs and themes correctly. So one thing we'll do here is start to build out wireframes. And these really are just where we're kind of going to take those facts and dimensions and build out wireframes that actually assign them to various reporting themes. This really serves two different purposes. One of those is in the future. This will help us as we begin to build reports, dashboards, different analytics tools. Help us kind of get a head start there in building those. And then also, it's really just a good way to, with different functions of the business, say, hey, here's what we heard. Here are the different metrics we think are important to you. Here's how we would look at them. Does that make sense? So they're a really great tool to summarize those functional interviews and read them back to the business. Okay, and then finally here, we're going to get to the when. So this is, what's the order of operations here? There's two really important pieces here. One of those is, in those first two phases, we're really going to identify like, what are we going to build? Some of those will be dashboards. They could be different AI initiatives, all these different things. And there's two key factors to consider there, which is really the value and the complexity. Typically, there's going to be a trade-off. But really what we want to do here is map all that out. That way we can prioritize based on those things. So typically what we'll see is high value items that are low complexity. Those are going to be our quick wins. These might be things that there's something that seems simple, but we've just never been able to do it before because we didn't have the data aligned in the right way. And so now we'll be able to, and it's going to add a ton of value. Things that are more difficult, these might be what we call strategic initiatives, which are things that are super valuable and also super complex to put together. So still important, but we have to do a little more work to get them in place. I'll say value here is relative, right? When I say low value, what I'm really saying is like, this might be something that only one or two people are going to use. This might be like a dashboard just to look at accounts receivable for someone in the accounting function, like something that makes a few people's lives a little bit easier, but is also really simple. We'll typically call those like operational or functional initiatives and move those into like a later phase of the project. And then finally, they've got the items that are lower value and higher complexity, and those are going to be like the items that we're going to push either way out into the future, or at least stagger them throughout the rest of the project to ensure we're hitting things that are high value first. So all of that's going to inform how we define kind of an execution roadmap of what we're going to do. We'll define the order of how we develop our architecture. If we're implementing new systems, understanding when we sunset our legacy systems and when we integrate our new systems. And then also understanding, like, again, based on this kind of prioritization exercise, like what are we going to build first from a reporting perspective? Which tools are we going to build first? All those things are really important to understand as we look at this kind of holistically. One thing I want to call out here is really those high impact or high value, low complexity items. One thing that we see a lot with as a team begins to start with a data strategy is if they don't build momentum early, it's very easy for it to fizzle out. So targeting those high impact early wins or easy wins early in the process can really prove the value of what you're doing immediately. Again, if some of those are like high enough in ROI, we almost call them like a self-funding win, where basically you solve this one problem and it's going to pay for all the other cool things you want to do within the organization, whether it's like a true monetary aspect, or if it's just like getting you that buy-in that you need to be able to do the larger strategic transformations you want to do. Okay, so covered a lot there, but just to summarize what we talked about, at the core for a data strategy, it needs to align every part of the business back to the business. So people, processes, technology, and goals all need to be aligned. It's really important to build with a blueprint, which is why we do the data strategy in the first place. You want to prioritize the architecture and governance you're going to put in place before you start to build. And then build momentum early, right? The sooner you can prove that what you're doing is valuable to the organization, the sooner you're going to get buy-in from the people who are going to be using the tools you're building, and the sooner you're going to get buy-in from leadership to like let you do the cool AI initiatives that you really want to do. All right. So yeah, I'm going to open it up for questions now. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat. Okay, got one question here. We purchased a bunch of different systems and we never did a straight data strategy. Is it too late and should we still do one? So yeah, definitely great question here. It is never too late. In fact, I would say most of the time when we're brought in is really in those situations where things have gotten a little out of control. I would say it's never too late. Typically what we're going to do is throw some sort of architecture together that helps align all these different systems that you purchased over the years. That way you're not starting from scratch needing to buy new systems, but really just we'll put together a strategy that aligns those systems together, aligns your data together, and helps you build a more cohesive reporting structure for your organization. So yes, never too late, always do one. I've got one more in the chat. What do organizations struggle with the most when getting started? So I would say one of the biggest things is getting buy-in. And again, that's why it's really important to get that momentum started early. And it's also why it's really important to have a cohesive plan. I would say your stakeholders are much more likely to buy into a project if they can tell that the project is well thought out and that you've thought through how it's going to build value for the business and that it's not just a fun little data project, right? So really, really important to start with something that is going to build value. You want to put that early in the roadmap. And it's got to be something that's going to build value and it's going to build it quick. And then, yeah, in general, just one of the toughest things is getting alignment across the organization. That's where, honestly, one of the best things to do is just get face-to-face time across as many functions as you can, and really even maybe do some cross-functional meetings to ensure that the organization is aligned on what's important. Um, that way you can prioritize what you're building correctly. Great. Obviously, if there's any other questions, please feel free to reach out. Um, always happy to partner, whether it's from a strategy perspective, or if you've already got a strategy and you're ready to start building, we can build pretty much anything. So yeah, thank you all so much for joining. I appreciate the time. If there's any further questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks.